These reading streams make me so nervous. I don't like it. Oh, that is not the name of the title. Hello. There we go. Much better. Much better. See this. Just change a couple of things about the stream info. That. Oop, oop. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. That looks right. That looks right. Okay. I'm gonna let people filter on through before we get started. Because, you know, people might want to be here for this. Not necessarily, but like maybe.
What you think about when you're born into a fire? Let 'em burn it out. Sell 'em to the richest buyer. They wanna let the world decay. They tell us lies and fade away. We feel betrayed. We were raised to
Oh no, I didn't mean to do that.
wake it to the back of the pack, kill it anyway. Listen up now, because we're never dropping out. Beat the odds, beat the big house. Our brains are bigger than the doubt. We've been thinking for ourselves, never let the truth fade away. This is bigger than ourselves, we won't let the world burn away. We feel betrayed. We were raised to lose the race. Wake it to the back of the pack, kill it anyway. To blame, haters face the world's mistakes. Wake it to the back of the pack, kill it anyway. You think you've got my number figured out? A motive born in drought and brevity. And if I'm not the soul of your desire,
Chat, these reading streams make me so nervous. Why am I so nervous? Oh, it's fine. It's fine. We're fine. Okay, y'all. Excuse me, my goodness. Dracon, hello, welcome in, friend. You the best, thank you for the bits. It's book club night. I'm just waiting for people to filter in slowly. If you haven't been to book club before, which totally understandable because it's only the second week I'm doing it, I wanted to do a book club and have it be virtual, but I didn't just want people to like read the books separately and talk about it after, because I know a lot of people who would enjoy the kind of books that I would read, but they don't actually read. So I was looking for a way to like share my favorite stories with people, even if they don't necessarily read. So I came to the conclusion that it might be best. It might be a cool idea, it might be fun, I don't know, to do a series of live readings from the books until we finish, and then we can sit down and have a discussion like a traditional book club might. So last week I read with very bad accents, I might add, the first 4 chapters of Stormbreaker, which is the first book in the Alex Rider series. And it went pretty well. I think it went pretty well. And so this is week 2. It's happening. We're doing it. It's exciting. Yeah. For those of you who are gonna stick around in chat, what I usually do, well, not what I usually do because this is only day 2, but what my intention is that I will periodically stop and go through and read chat and stuff, but it's probably going to be at the end of every chapter, unless the chapters are particularly long, and then I might stop part of the way through and check chat and do it that way. But if you guys see, if you all see people trickling in and they don't really know what's going on, or they have questions, if you could drop the book or book club commands, that's just !book or !book club, it'll pop out explanations like you see in chat right now, and theoretically could could get people up to speed, but if you would like to step in and explain what's happening, I would appreciate that too. We're gonna get started any minute here. I was waiting to see if one of my mods was gonna show up. If he doesn't pop in, then in the next couple of minutes, I'm just gonna get started anyway. The VOD will be up. Anybody who pops in later can watch the VOD. But how we doing, chat? Drakon, how are ya? I'm just gonna minimize that. There we go. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna minimize that. Cool. Alright, oh my god, I get so nervous for these reading streams. Like, ridiculously nervous. It's fine, we're fine. I'm gonna change the music up a little bit. This is an excellent playlist. It's a great album. But I need something a little more chill if we're gonna do reading. So, something like this. Oop, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Alright, so last Monday, we read the first 4 chapters of Stormbreaker, and my intention tonight is to get through chapters 5 through 9. We might only get through 5 through 8, but we'll see. It's a lot. I didn't expect for last week's reading stream to take as much out of me as it did, but it definitely did. It kicked my ass. My throat was sore by the end of it. I was losing my voice. I am not used to reading out loud for long periods of time. I don't think any of us really are, unless, like, you know, you're a voice actor recording an audiobook or some shit, but after last week's book club, especially with all of the different, like, voices and stuff I was doing, ooh, my voice was shot, I'm not gonna lie. Alright. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So we've got Stormbreaker here. Again, it's the first book in the Alex Rider series. I think I'm just gonna work my way through the whole series and then settle on something else after that. But we'll be set for a while with this series. I think there's like 10 or 11 books in the series. There's a lot. And I own them all. They are all sitting on my bookshelf. So, at the end of chapter 4, we find out that Alex's uncle, who was killed in what the state says was a car accident, was actually a shooting, because Ian Ryder, which is Alex's uncle, was actually a spy for MI6, a spy for the British government. And they have successfully recruited Alex to kind of infiltrate the home base of one of the most brilliant computer engineers in the world, because he's donating a bunch of computers, groundbreaking computers, to British schools, and they think that something is sus. So Alex is going to go in undercover as the winner of like a lottery to meet the guy and try out the computer and all that jazz. And that's what we found out in the first 4 chapters, basically. So I'm going to turn the music down a little more. Just a little more. I want like a taste of music, not a mouthful. Does that make sense? Just a little bit for flavor. I don't want it to be overpowering. Music is not a banana. You put a banana in a shake and it overpowers everything else. Music is not a banana. It's just music. Oh God, who have I turned into? Okay, we're gonna get started. This is chapter 5. It's called Double O Nothing. For the 100th time, Alex cursed Alan Blunt, using language he didn't realize he knew. It was almost 5 o'clock in the evening, and although it could have been 5 o'clock in the morning, the sky had barely changed at all throughout the day. It was gray, cold, and unforgiving. The rain was still falling, a thin drizzle that traveled horizontally in the wind, soaking through his supposedly waterproof clothing, mixing with his sweat and his dirt, and chilling him to the bone. He unfolded his map and checked his position once again. He had to be close to the last RV that day, the last rendezvous point, but he could see absolutely nothing. He was standing on a narrow track made up of loose gray pebbles that crunched under his combat boots as when he walked. The track snaked around the side of a mountain with a sheer drop to the right. He was somewhere in the Brecon Beacons, and there should have been a view, but it had been wiped out by the rain and the fading light. A few trees twisted out of the side of the hill with leaves as hard as thorns. Behind him, below him, ahead of him, it was all the same. Nowhere land. Alex hurt. The 22-pound Bergen backpack that he had been forced to wear cut into his shoulders and had rubbed blisters into his back. His right knee, where he had fallen earlier that day, was no longer bleeding, but still stung. His shoulder was bruised and there was a gash along the side of his neck. His camouflage outfit, he'd swapped out his Gap combat trousers for the real thing, fitted him badly, cutting in between his legs and under his arms, but hanging loose everywhere else. He was close to exhaustion, he knew, almost too tired. No, that wasn't right. Let me start again. He was close to exhaustion, he knew. Almost too tired to know how much pain he was in. But for the glucose and the caffeine tablets in his survival pack, he would have ground to a halt hours ago. He knew that if he didn't find the RV soon, he would be physically unable to continue. Then he would be thrown off the course, binned as they called it. They would like that. Swallowing down the taste of defeat, Alex folded his map and forced himself onward. It was his 9th, or maybe 10th, day of training. Time had begun to dissolve into itself, as shapeless as the rain. After his lunch with Alan Blunt and Mrs. Jones, he had been moved out of the manor house and into a crude wooden hut a few miles away. There were 9 huts in total, each equipped with 4 metal beds and 4 metal lockers. The 5th had been squeezed into one of the cabins to accommodate Alex. 2 more huts, painted a different color, stood side by side. One of those was a kitchen and a mess hall. The other contained toilets, sinks, and showers, with not a single hot faucet in sight. On his first day there, Alex had been introduced to his training officer, an incredibly fit black sergeant. He was the sort of man who thought he'd seen everything, until he saw Alex, and he had examined the new arrival for a long minute before he'd spoken. "It's not my job to ask questions," he said, "but if it was, I don't know what they were thinking sending me children. Do you have any idea where you are, boy? This isn't holiday camp. This isn't Disneyland." He cut the word into 3 syllables and spat them out. "I have you for 12 days, and they expect me to give you the sort of training that should take 14 weeks. That's not just mad. That's suicidal." "I didn't ask to be here," Alex said, and suddenly the sergeant was furious. "You don't speak to me until I give you permission," he shouted. "And when you speak to me, you address me as sir. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Alex had already decided that the man was even worse than his geography teacher. "There are 5 units operational here at the moment," the officer went on. "You'll join K Unit. We don't We don't use names. I have no name. You have no name. If anyone asks you what you're doing, you tell them nothing. Some of my men will be hard on you. Some of them will resent you being here. That's too bad. You'll just have to live with it. And there's nothing else you need to know. I can make allowances for you. You are a boy, not a man, but if you complain, you will be binned. And if you cry, you will be binned. If you cannot keep up, you will be binned. Between you and me, boy, this is a mistake, and I want to bin you. After that, Alex joined K Unit. As the sergeant had predicted, they weren't exactly overjoyed to see him. There were 4 of them. As Alex was soon to discover, the Special Operations Division of MI6 sent its agents to the same training center used by Special Air Service, the SAS. Much of the training was based on SAS methods and this included the numbers and makeup of each team. So there were 4 men, each with their own specialties, and 1 boy, seemingly with none. Thank you, Sleepy Bean Sam. I appreciate it. We are reading Stormbreaker, which is the first book in the Alex Rider series. We're currently on chapter 5. And yeah, hope you can enjoy it. Get cozy. Grab a snack. Get a blanket. Something. Alright. Let's see. They were all in their mid-20s, spread out over the bunks in companionable silence. 2 of them were smoking, one was dismantling and reassembling a gun, a 9mm Browning high-power pistol. Each of them had been given a code name: Wolf, Fox, Eagle, and Snake. From now on, Alex would be known as Cub. The leader, Wolf, was the one with the gun. He was short and muscular with square shoulders and black I am having a hard time saying this. And black, close cropped hair. He had a handsome face, made slightly uneven by his nose, which had been broken at some point in the past. He was the first to speak. Putting the gun down, he examined Alex with cold, dark brown eyes. "So who the hell do you think you are?" he demanded. "Cub," Alex replied. "A bloody schoolboy!" Wolf spoke with a strange, slightly foreign accent. "I don't believe it." "Are you with Special Operations?" "I'm not allowed to tell you that." Alex went over to his bunk and sat down. The mattress felt as solid as the frame, and despite the cold, there was only 1 blanket. Wolf shook his head and smiled humorlessly. "Look what they've sent us," he muttered. 007? 00 nothing's more like it. And after that, the name stuck. 00 nothing was what they called him. In the days that followed, Alex shadowed the group, not quite part of it, but never far away. Almost everything they did, he did. Reading, radio communication, and first aid. He took part in an unarmed combat class and was knocked to the ground so often that it took all his nerve to persuade himself to get up again. And then there was the assault course. 5 times he was shouted and bullied across the nightmare of nets and ladders, tunnels and ditches, towering walls and swinging tightropes that stretched out for almost a quarter of a mile in and over the woodland beside the huts. Alex thought of it as the adventure playground from hell. First time he tried it, he fell off a rope into a pit filled with freezing slime. Half drowned and filthy, he'd been set back to the start by the sergeant. Alex thought he would never get to the end, but the second time he finished it in 25 minutes, which he had cut into 17 minutes by the end of the week. Bruised and exhausted though he was quietly pleased with himself. Even Wolf had only managed it in 12. Wolf remained actively hostile towards Alex. The other 3 men simply ignored him. But Wolf did everything to taunt or humiliate him. It was as if Alex had somehow insulted him by being placed in the group. Once, crawling under the nets, Wolf lashed out with his foot, missing Alex's face by an inch. Of course, he would have said it was an accident if the boot had connected. Another time, he was more successful, tripping Alex up in the mess hall and sending him flying, along with his tray, cutlery, and steaming plate of stew. And every time he spoke to Alex, he used the same sneering tone of voice. "Good night, 009, don't wet the bed." Alex bit his lip and said nothing, but he was glad when the 4 men were sent off for their day's jungle survival course. This wasn't part of his own training. Even though the sergeant worked him twice as hard until they were gone, Alex preferred to be on his own. But on the 10th day, Wolf did something close to finishing him altogether, and it happened in the killing house. The killing house was a fake, a mock-up of an embassy used to train the SAS in the art of hostage release. Alex had twice watched K-Unit go into the house, the first time swinging down from the roof, and had followed their progress on a closed-circuit TV. All 4 men were armed. Alex himself didn't take part because someone somewhere had decided he shouldn't carry a gun. Inside the killing house, mannequins had been arranged as terrorists and hostages, smashing down the doors and using stun grenades to clear the rooms while, with deafening multiple blasts, Wolf, Fox, Eagle, and Snake had successfully completed their mission both times. This time, Alex had joined them. The killing house had been booby-trapped. They weren't told how. All 5 of them were unarmed, and the job was simply to get from one end of the house to the other without being killed. They almost made it. In the first room, made up to look like a huge dining room, they found pressure pads under the carpets and the infrared beams across the doors. For Alex, it had been an eerie experience, tiptoeing behind the 4 men, watching as they dismantled the 2 devices, using cigarette smoke to expose the otherwise invisible beam. It was strange to be afraid of everything and yet see nothing. In the hallway there was a motion detector, which would have activated a machine gun. Alex assumed it was loaded with blanks, behind a Japanese screen. The 3rd room was empty. The 4th was a living room with an exit, a pair of French windows on the other side. There was a tripwire barely thicker than a human hair running the entire width of the room. And the French windows were alarmed. When Snake dealt with the alarm, Fox and Eagle prepared to neutralize the tripwire, unclipping the electronic circuit board and a variety of tools from their belts. Wolf stopped them. "Leave it, we're out of here." At that same moment, Snake signaled. He had deactivated the alarm, and the French windows were now open. Snake was the first out, then Fox and Eagle. Alex would have been the last to leave the room, but just as he reached the exit, he found Wolf blocking his way. "Tough luck, 009, Wolf said. His voice was soft, almost kind. The next thing Alex knew, the heel of Wolf's palm had slammed into his chest, pushing him down with astonishing force. Taken by surprise, he lost his balance and fell, remembering the tripwire, and he tried to twist his body to avoid it, but it was hopeless. His flailing hand caught the wire, and he actually felt it against his wrist. He hit the floor, pulling the wire with him. The tripwire activated a stun grenade, a small device filled with a mixture of magnesium powder and mercury fulminate. The blast didn't just deafen Alex, it shuddered right through him as if trying to rip out his heart. The light from the ignited mercury burned for a full 5 seconds, so blinding that even closing his eyes made no difference. Alex lay there, with his face against the hard wooden floor, his hands scrabbling against his head, unable to move, waiting for it to end. But even then it wasn't over. When the flare finally died down, it was as if all of the light in the room had burned out with it. Alex stumbled to his feet, unable to see or hear, not even sure anymore where he was. He felt sick to his stomach. The room swayed around him, and the heavy smell of chemicals hung in the air. 10 minutes later, he staggered out into the open. Wolf was waiting for him with the others, his face blank. He had slipped out before Alex even hit the ground. The unit's training officer walked angrily over to him. Alex hadn't expected to see a shred of concern in the man's face, and he wasn't disappointed. "You want to tell me what happened in there, cub?" he demanded, and when Alex didn't answer, he went on. "You ruined the exercise! You fouled up! You could have got the whole unit binned! So you better start telling me what went wrong!" Alex glanced at Wolf. Wolf looked the other way. What should he say? Should he even try to tell the truth? "Well?" The sergeant was waiting. "Nothing happened, sir," Alex said. "I just wasn't looking where I was going. I stepped on something and there was an explosion." "If that was real life, you'd be dead," the sergeant said. "What did I tell you? Sending me a child was a mistake. And a stupid, clumsy child who doesn't look where he's going, that's even worse." Alex stood where he was, and he knew he was blushing. Half of him wanted to answer back, but he bit his tongue, and out of the corner of his eye he could see Wolf half smiling. The sergeant had seen it too. "You think it's so funny, Wolf? You can go clean up in there. And tonight, you better get some rest, all of you, because tomorrow, you've got a 30-mile hike, no rations, no lighters, no fire. This is a survival course, and if you do survive, then maybe you'll have a reason to smile." Alex remembered the words now, exactly 24 hours later. He had spent the last 11 of them on his feet, following a trail that the sergeant had set out for him on the map. The exercise had begun at 6 o'clock in the morning after the gray-lit breakfast of sausage and beans. Wolf and the others had disappeared into the distance ahead of him a long time ago, even though they'd been given 55-pound backpacks to carry. They had also been given only 8 hours to complete the course. Allowing for his age, Alex had been given 12. He rounded a corner, his feet scrunching on the gravel. There was someone standing ahead of him. It was the sergeant. He had just lit a cigarette, and Alex watched him slide the matches back into his pocket. Seeing him there brought back the shame and the anger the day before, and at the same time sapped the last of his strength. Suddenly, Alex had had enough of Blunt, Mrs. Jones, Wolf, the whole stupid thing. With a final effort, he stumbled forward the last 100 yards and came to a halt. Rain and sweat trickled down the side of his face. His hair, dark now with grime, was glued across his forehead. The sergeant looked at his watch. 11 hours, 5 minutes. That's not bad, cub, but the others were here 3 hours ago. Bully for them, Alex thought, but he didn't say anything. Anyway, you should just make it to the first RV, the sergeant went on. It's up there. He pointed to a wall. Not a sloping wall, a sheer one. A solid rock rising 2 or 3 feet. No, oh my God, sorry. Solid rock rising 200 or 300 feet up without a handhold or a foothold in sight. Even looking at it, Alex felt his stomach shrink. Ian Ryder had taken him climbing. In Scotland, in France, all over Europe. But he'd never attempted anything as difficult as this. Not on his own, and not when he was so tired. "I can't," he said. In the end, the 2 words came out easily. "I didn't hear that," the sergeant said. I said I can't do it, sir." "Can't isn't a word we use around here." "I don't care. I've had enough. I've just had..." Alex's voice cracked. He didn't trust himself to go on. He stood there, cold and empty, waiting for the axe to fall. But it didn't. The sergeant gazed at him for a long minute, and he nodded his head slowly. "Listen to me, cub," he said. "I know what happened in the killing house." Alex glanced up. "Wolf forgot about the closed-circuit TV. We've got it all on film." "Well, then why?" Alex began. "Did you make a complaint against him, cub?" "No, sir." "Do you want to make a complaint against him, cub?" A pause. Then, "No, sir." "Good." The sergeant pointed at the rock face, suggesting a path up with his finger. "It's not as difficult as it looks," he said, "and they're waiting for you just over the top. You've got a nice cold dinner. Survival rations. Wouldn't want to miss that." Alex drew a deep breath and started forward. As he passed the sergeant, he stumbled out and put a hand out to steady himself, brushing up against him. "Sorry, sir," he said. It took him 20 minutes to reach the top, and sure enough, K-Unit was already there, crouching around 3 small tents that they must have just pitched earlier in the afternoon. 2 just large enough for sharing, and 1, the smallest, for Alex. Snake, a thin, fair-haired man who spoke with a Scottish accent, looked up at Alex. He had a tin of cold stew in one hand, a teaspoon in the other. "I didn't think you'd make it," he said. Alex couldn't help but notice a certain warmth in the man's voice, and for the first time, he hadn't called him 00 "Nor did I," Alex said. Wolf was squatting over what he hoped would become a campfire, trying to get it started with 2 flint stones, while Fox and Eagle watched. He was getting nowhere. The stones only produced the smallest of sparks, and the scraps of newspaper and leaves that he'd collected were already far too wet. Wolf struck at the stones again and again. The others watched, their faces glum. Alex held out the box of matches he had pickpocketed from the sergeant when he'd pretended to stumble at the foot of the rock face. "These might help." He threw the matches down and then went into his tent. And that was chapter 5, chat. Oh my goodness. I am tripping all over my tongue tonight. I can't seem to say the words. Reading is hard. English is weird. Also, get ready for more bad accents. We're about to get introduced to a character who is supposed to have like an Egyptian accent, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know how to do an Egyptian accent. So, there's that. Okay. Let's get started with chapter 6. Also, what happened to Dees? Here we go. I was like, I can't hear the music. What's going on? There's no music? Alright, let's start chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called Toys Aren't Us. In the London office, Mrs. Jones sat waiting while Alan Blunt read the report. The sun was shining. A pigeon was strutting back and forth along the ledge as if it were keeping guard. "He's doing very well," Blunt said at last. "Remarkably well, in fact." He turned a page. "I see he missed target practice." "Were you planning to give him a gun?" Mrs. Jones said. "No, I don't think that would be a good idea." Thank you for the hydrate, Druid. Let me do that real quick. Thank you. Reading out loud like this makes your throat very dry. I appreciate that. Thank you for taking care of me. You should hydrate too. Alright. "No, I don't think that would be a very good idea." "Then why does he need the target practice?" Blunt raised an eyebrow. "We can't give a teenager a gun," he said. "On the other hand, I don't think we could send him to Port Talon empty-handed. You'd better have a word with Smithers. I already have. He's working on it now. Mrs. Jones stood up as if to leave, but at the door she hesitated. I wonder if it's occurred to you that Ryder may have been preparing him for this all along, she said. What do you mean? Preparing Alex to replace him. Ever since the boy was old enough to walk, he's been trained for intelligence work, but without knowing it. I mean, he's lived abroad, so he speaks French, German, and Spanish. He's been mountain climbing, diving, and skiing. He's learned karate. Physically, he's in perfect shape. She shrugged. I think Ryder wanted Alex to become a spy. But not too soon, Blunt said. I agree. You know as well as I do, Alan. He's not ready yet. And if we send him into Sale Enterprises, he's going to get himself killed. Perhaps. The single word was cold. Matter of fact. He's 14 years old. We can't do that. We have to. Blunt stood up and opened the window, letting in the air and the sound of the traffic. The pigeon hurled itself off the ledge, afraid of him. This whole business worries me, he said. The Prime Minister sees the Stormbreakers as a major coup. For himself and for his government. But there's still something about Herod's Sale that I don't like. Did you tell the boy about Yasin Gregorovich? No. Mrs. Jones shook her head. Then it's time you did. It was Yasin who killed his uncle, I'm sure of it. And if Yasin was working for Sale... What will you do if Yasin kills Alex Ryder? That's not our problem, Mrs. Jones. If the boy gets himself killed, then at least we'll have final proof that there was something wrong. At the very least, it'll allow me to postpone the Stormbreaker project and take a good hard look at what's going on in Port Talon. In a way, it would almost help us if he was killed. The boy's not ready yet. He'll make mistakes. It won't take them long to find out who he is. Mrs. Jones sighed. I don't think Alex has got much of a chance at all. I agree. Mr. Blunt turned back from the window. The sun slanted over his shoulder. A single shadow fell across his face. But it's too late to worry about that now. We have no more time. Stop the training now. Send him in. Alex sat hunched up at the back of a low-flying C-130 military aircraft, his stomach churning behind his knees. There were 11 men sitting in 2 lines around him, his own unit and 2 others. For an hour now, the plane had been flying at just 300 feet, following the Welsh valleys, dipping and swerving to avoid the mountain peaks. A single bulb glowing red behind a wire mesh, adding to the heat in the cramped cabin. Alex could feel the engines vibrating through him. It was like traveling in a spin dryer and a microwave oven combined. The thought of jumping out of a plane... A plane? I think I need to reset for a second. The thought of jumping out of a plane with an oversized silk umbrella would have made Alex sick. Should have made Alex sick with fear, but only that morning. He'd been told that, in fact, he wouldn't be jumping. A message from London. They couldn't risk him breaking a leg, it said, and Alex guessed that the end of his training was near. Even so, he'd been taught how to pack a parachute, how to control it, how to exit a plane, and how to land. And at the end of the day, the sergeant had instructed him to join the flight, just for the experience. Now, close to the drop zone, Alex felt almost disappointed. He'd watch everyone else jump, and then he'd be alone. P-5. The voice of the pilot came over the speaker system, distant and metallic. Alex gritted his teeth. 5 minutes till the jump. He looked at the other men, shuffling in position, checking the cords that connected them to the static line. He was sitting next to Wolf, and to his surprise, the man was completely quiet, unmoving. It was hard to tell in the half-darkness, but the look on his face could almost have been fear. There was a loud buzz, and the red light turned green. The assistant pilot had climbed through from the cockpit. He reached for a handle and pulled open the door set in the back of the aircraft, allowing the cold air to rush in. Alex could see a single square of night. It was raining. The rain howled past. The green light began to flash. The assistant pilot tapped the first pair on their shoulders, and Alex watched them shuffle over to the side and then throw themselves out. For a moment, they were there, frozen in the doorway. Then, they were gone like a photograph crumpled and spun away by the wind. 2 more men followed, then another 2. Wolf would be the last to leave, and with Alex not jumping, he would be on his own. It took less than a minute, and suddenly, Alex was aware that he and Wolf were the only ones left. "Move it!" the assistant pilot shouted above the roar of the engines. Wolf picked himself up. His eyes briefly met Alex's, and in that moment, Alex knew. Wolf was a popular leader. He was tough and he was fast, completing a 30-mile hike as if it were just a stroll in the park. But he had a weak spot. Somehow, he'd allowed this parachute jump to get to him, and he was too scared to move. It was hard to believe. But there he was, frozen in the doorway, his arms rigid, staring out. Alex glanced back. The assistant pilot was looking the other way. He hadn't seen what was happening. And when he did, if Wolf failed to make the jump, it would be the end of his training and maybe even the end of his career. Even hesitating would be bad enough. He'd be binned. Alex thought for a moment. Wolf hadn't moved. Alex could see his shoulders rising and falling as he tried to summon up the courage to go. 10 seconds had passed. Maybe more. The assistant pilot was leaning down, stowing away a piece of equipment. Alex stood up. "Wolf," he said. Wolf didn't hear him. Alex took one last quick look at the assistant pilot, then kicked out with all of his strength. His foot slammed into Wolf's backside. He'd put all his strength behind it. Wolf was caught by surprise, his hands coming free as he plunged into the swirling night air. The assistant pilot turned around and saw Alex. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Just stretching my legs," Alex shouted back. The plane curved in the air and began the journey home. Mrs. Jones was waiting for him when he walked into the hangar. She was sitting at a table, wearing a gray silk jacket and trousers, with a black handkerchief flowing from her top pocket. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Alex was dressed in a flying suit. His hair was damp from the rain. His face was pinched with tiredness, and he seemed to have grown older over the past 2 weeks. None of the men had arrived back yet. A truck had been sent to collect them from a field, but that was about 2 miles away. "Alex," she said. Alex looked at her but said nothing. "It was my decision to stop you from jumping," she said. "I hope you're not disappointed. I just thought it was too much of a risk. Please, sit down." Alex sat down opposite her. "I have something that might cheer you up," she went on. "I brought you some toys." "I'm too old for toys," Alex said. "Not these toys." She signaled, and a man appeared, walking out of the shadows, carrying a tray of equipment that he set down on the table. The man was enormously fat. Beneath the spread of his buttocks, Alex was surprised that could eat. Wait, what? Oh, he sat down in a metal chair, and Alex was surprised he could even take his weight. He was bald, with a black mustache and several chins. each one melting into the next, and finally into his neck and shoulders. He wore a pinstripe suit which must have used enough material to make a tent. I have to do a voice for this guy, and I just can't. "Smithers," he said, nodding to Alex. "Very nice to meet you, old chap." "What have you got for him?" Mrs. Jones demanded. "I'm afraid we haven't had a great deal of time, Mrs. J," Smithers replied. "The challenge was to think what a 14-year-old might carry with him, and adapt it." He picked up the first object off of the tray. A yo-yo. It was slightly larger than normal. Black plastic. "Let's start with this," Smithers said. Alex shook his head. He couldn't believe any of this. "Don't tell me," he exclaimed. "It's some sort of secret weapon." "Not exactly. I was told you wouldn't have weapons. You're too young." "So it's not really a hand grenade? Pull the string and run like hell?" "Certainly not. It's a yo-yo." Smithers pulled out the string, holding it between a pudgy finger and thumb. "However, the string is a special sort of nylon, very advanced. There's 30 yards of it, and it can lift weights of up to 200 pounds. The actual yo-yo is motorized and clips to your belt. Very useful for climbing." "Amazing." Alex was unimpressed. "And then there's this." Mr. Smithers produced a small tube. Alex read the side. "Zit Clean for healthier skin." "Nothing personal," Smithers went on apologetically. "But we thought it was something a boy of your age might carry, and it's rather remarkable." He opened the tube and squeezed some of the cream onto his finger. "Completely harmless when you touch it, but bring it into contact with metal and it's quite another story." He wiped his finger, smearing the cream onto the surface of the table. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wisp of smoke twisted upwards in the air. The metal sizzled, and a jagged hole appeared. "It'll do that to just about any metal," Smithers explained. "Very useful if you need to break through a lock." He took out a handkerchief and wiped his finger clean. "Anything else?" Mrs. Jones asked. "Oh yes, Mrs. J. You could say this is our piece de resistance." He picked up a brightly colored box that Alex recognized immediately as a Nintendo Color Game Boy. "What teenager would be complete without one of these?" he said. "This one comes with 4 games, and the beauty of it is, each cartridge turns the computer into something quite different." He showed Alex the first game, Nemesis. If you insert this one, the computer becomes a fax or photocopier, which gives you direct contact with us, and vice versa. Just pass the screen through any page you want to transmit, and we'll have it here in seconds. He produced a second game, Exosect. This one turns the computer into an X-ray device. Place the machine against any solid surface less than 2 inches thick and watch the screen. It has an audio function too. You just have to plug in earphones. Useful for eavesdropping. It's not as powerful as I'd like, but we're working on it. The third game was called Speed Wars. This one's a bug finder, Smithers explained. You can use the computers to sweep a room and check if somebody's trying to listen in on you. I suggest you use it the moment you arrive. And finally, my own favorite. Smithers held up a final cartridge. It was labeled Bomber Boy. Do I get to play this one? Alex asked. You can play all 4 of them. They all have a built-in games function. But as the name might suggest, it's actually a smoke bomb. This time, the cartridge doesn't go into the machine. You leave it somewhere in a room and press start 3 times on the console, and the bomb will be set off by a remote control. Useful camouflage if you need to escape in a hurry. Thank you, Smithers, Mrs. Jones said. I see your, hydrate druid I'll get to in just a second. Thank you, Smithers, Mrs. Jones said. My pleasure, Mrs. J. Smithers stood up, his legs straining to take the huge weight. I hope to see more of you again, Alex. I've never had to equip a boy before. I'm sure I'll be able to think of a whole host of quite delightful ideas. He waddled off and disappeared through a door that clanged shut behind him. Okay. Now we do water. Are you thirsty? You should have some water. Even if you're not thirsty, you should probably have some water. Let me just check my... Oh, sorry. Let me check the battery on this real quick. How are we doing? It left. I'm going for right at an hour. Okay, let's see. We might only be able to get through chapter 8 tonight. Oh my god. Wait. Where did chapter 9 start? Oh, there it is. Yeah, we can probably get through chapter 8, but I won't go past 9. Okay. Let's see. Let me get back into it. Mrs. Jones turned to Alex. You'll leave tomorrow for Port Talon, she said. You'll be going under the name of Felix Lester. She handed him an envelope. The real Felix Lester left for Florida yesterday. You'll find everything you need to know about him in here. I'll read it in bed. Good. Suddenly she was serious, and Alex found himself wondering if she herself was a mother. If so, she could well have a son his age. She took out a black and white photograph and laid it on the table. It was a man in a white t-shirt and jeans. He was in his late 20s, with light, close-cropped hair, a smooth face, and the body of a dancer. The photograph was slightly blurred, as if it had been taken from a distance, possibly with a hidden camera. I want you to look at this, she said. I'm looking. His name is Yasin Grigorovich. He was born in Russia, but he now works for many countries. Iraq has employed him, also Serbia, Libya, and China. What does he do? Alex asked. He's a contract killer, Alex. We believe it was he who killed Ian Ryder. There was a long pause. Alex had almost managed to persuade himself that this whole business was just some sort of crazy adventure. A game. But looking at the cold face with its blank hooded eyes, he felt something stirring inside him, and he knew it was fear. He remembered his uncle's car, shattered by bullets. A man like this, a contract killer, would do the same to him, and he wouldn't even blink. This photograph was taken 6 months ago in Cuba, Mrs. Jones was saying. It may have been a coincidence, but Herod Sale was there at the same time. The two of them may have met, and there is something else. She paused. Ryder used a code in the last message he sent. A single letter. Why? Why for Yasin? He must have seen Yasin somewhere in Port Talon. He wanted us to know. Why are you telling me this now? Alex asked. His mouth had gone dry. Because if you see him, if Yasin is anywhere near Sale Enterprises, I want you to contact us at once. And then? We'll pull you out. Doesn't matter how old you are, Alex. If Yasin finds out that you're working for us, he will kill you too. She took the photograph back. Alex stood up. You'll leave here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, Mrs. Jones said. Be careful, Alex. And good luck. Alex walked across the hangar, his footsteps echoing. Behind him, Mrs. Jones unwrapped a peppermint and slipped it into her mouth. Her breath always smelled faintly of mint. As head of special operations, how many men had she sent to their deaths? Ian Ryder and maybe dozens more? Perhaps it was easier for her if her breath was sweet. There was a movement ahead of him, and he saw that the parachutists had gotten back from their jump. They were walking towards him out of the darkness, with Wolf and the other men from K Unit right at the front. Alex tried to step around him, but he found Wolf blocking his way. "You're leaving," Wolf said. Somehow, he must have heard that Alex's training was over. "Yes." There was a long pause. "What happened on the train?" he began. "Forget it, Wolf," Alex said. "Nothing happened. You jumped and I didn't, that's all." Wolf held out a hand. I want you to know I was wrong about you. You're all right, and maybe, one day, it would be good to work with you." "You never know," Alex said. They shook. "Good luck, Cub." "Goodbye, Wolf." Alex walked out into the night. That's the end of chapter 6. Oh my goodness, Chad, I'm not gonna lie. Reading out loud like this is some fucking work. It's work. Oh my god. Oh, and I've been so nervous and anxious this whole time. I'm so sweaty. Ugh. Okay. We're gonna take a breath. We're gonna have some water. How are we doing, chat? Let's check in. We feeling okay? Are you cozy? Why is this? Is the bottom not flat? That's bizarre. Oh no, it was just on top of a cord. Okay, I'm a dummy. It's fine. Druid, how was your nap? Are you hanging out here still? I hope you had a good nap. Okay. This is chapter 7. Can you read to me always? Anytime you want, Danny. Anytime you want, I will read to you. Okay, oh my god, I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. I don't know, that song seemed louder than the rest. Maybe it's just me. Like, can you read my emails to me? I'll pay you. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. I'm not gonna read your emails. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna read your emails. You couldn't pay me enough to do that. You couldn't afford me to read your emails. Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me, Danny. Oh my god, that was so loud. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to move my mic stand a little bit, and it protested loudly. Okay. Chapter 7. Salia. The silver-gray Mercedes S600 cruised down the freeway traveling south. Alex was sitting in the front passenger seat with so much soft leather around him he could barely hear the 389 horsepower 6-liter engine that was carrying him towards the Sale complex near Port Talon, Cornwall. That was a fucking sentence. That was one sentence. Jesus. Okay. Whew. Forgot to breathe. At 80 miles an hour, the engine was only idling, but Alex could feel the power of the car. 100,000 pounds worth of German engineering. One touch from the unsmiling chauffeur and the Mercedes would leap forward. This was a car that sneered at speed limits. Can you tell this was written by a man? Jesus. No female writer would be like, graphic details of the making of the car. I know that was incoherent. It was incoherent on purpose. Okay? Don't come for me. Anywho, this was a car that sneered at speed limits. Alex had been collecting... No. He hadn't been collecting. Alex had been collected that morning from a converted church in Hampstead, North London. This was where Felix Lester lived. When the driver had arrived, Alex had been waiting with his luggage, and there had even been a woman he had never met before, an MI6 operative, kissing him, telling him to brush his teeth, waving goodbye. As far as the driver was concerned, Alex was Felix. That morning, Alex had read through the file and knew that Lester went to a school called St. Anthony's, had 2 sisters and a pet Labrador. His father was an architect, his mother designed jewelry. A happy family. His family, if anyone asked. "How far is it to Port Talon?" he asked. So far, the driver had barely spoken a word. He answered Alex without much looking at him. "A few hours. You want some music?" "You got any John Lennon CDs?" This wasn't his choice, but according to the file, Felix Lester liked John Lennon. "No." "Forget it. I'll just get some sleep." He needed to sleep. He was still exhausted from the training and wondered how he would explain all the half-healed cuts and bruises if anyone saw underneath his shirt. Maybe he'd tell him he got bullied at school. He closed his eyes and allowed the leather to suck him into sleep. It was the feeling of the car slowing down that woke him. He opened his eyes and saw a fishing village, the blue sea beyond, a swath of rolling green hills, and a cloudless sky. It was the picture off a jigsaw puzzle, or perhaps a holiday brochure advertising a forgotten England. Seagulls swooped and cried overhead. An old tugboat, tangled nets, smoke, and fishing paint, pulled into the quay. A few locals, fishermen and their wives, stood around watching. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the village was caught in the slivery light that comes at the end of a perfect spring day. "Port Talon," the driver said. He must have noticed Alex opening his eyes. "It's pretty." "Not if you're a fish." They drove around the edge of the village and back inland down a lane that twisted between strangely bumpy fields. Alex saw the ruins of old buildings, half-crumbling chimneys and rusting metal wheels, and he knew he was looking at an old tin mine. They'd mined tin in Cornwall for 3,000 years, until one day the tin had run out. Now all that was left was the holes. About another mile down the lane, a metal fence sprung up. It was brand new, about 20 feet high, topped with razor wire. Arc lamps on scaffolding towers stood at regular intervals, and there were huge signs, red on white. You could have read them from the next country. "Sale Enterprises, strictly private. Trespassers will be shot," Alex muttered to himself. He had remembered what Mrs. Jones had told him. He's more or less formed his own private army. He's acting as if he's got something to hide. Well, that was certainly his first impression. The whole complex was somehow shocking, alien to the swooping hills and fields. The car reached the main gate, and there was a security cabin with an electronic barrier. A guard in a blue and gray uniform with SE printed on his jacket waved them through. The barrier lifted automatically, and then they were following a long, straight road over a stretch of land that had somehow been hammered flat with an airstrip on one side and a cluster of 4 high-tech buildings on the other. The buildings were large, smoked glass and steel, each one joined to the next by a covered walkway, and there were 2 aircraft next to the landing strip, a helicopter and a small cargo plane. Alex was impressed. The whole complex must have been a couple miles square. It was quite an operation. The Mercedes came to a roundabout with a fountain at the center, swept around it, and continued up towards a fantastic sprawling house. It was Victorian, red brick topped with copper domes and spires that had long ago turned green. There must have been at least 100 windows on 5 floors facing the drive. It was a house that just didn't know when to stop. The Mercedes pulled up the front, and the driver got out. "Follow me." "What about my luggage?" Alex asked. "It'll be brought." Alex and the driver went through the front door and into the hall dominated by a huge canvas. Judgment Day. The end of the world, painted 4 centuries ago as a swirling mass of doomed souls and demons. There were artworks everywhere. Watercolors, and oils, prints, drawings, sculptures in stone and bronze, all crowded together, with nowhere for the eye to rest. Alex followed the driver along a carpet so thick he almost bounced. He was beginning to feel claustrophobic, and he was relieved when they passed through a door into a vast, cathedral-like room that was practically bare. "Mr. Sayer will be here shortly," the driver said, and then he left. Alex looked around him. This was a modern room with a curving steel desk near the center, carefully positioned halogen lights, and a spiral staircase leading down from a perfect circle cut into the ceiling about 15 feet high. One entire wall was covered with a single sheet of glass, and walking over to it, Alex realized that he was looking at a gigantic aquarium. The sheer size of the thing drew him towards it. It was hard to imagine how many thousands of gallons of water the glass held back, but he was surprised to see the tank was empty. There were no fish, although it was big enough to hold a shark. And then something moved in the turquoise shadows, and Alex gasped with a mixture of horror and wonderment as the biggest jellyfish he had ever seen drifted into view. The main body of the creature was a shimmering, pulsating mass of white and mauve, shaped roughly like a cone. Beneath it, a mass of tentacles covered with circular stingers twisted in the water at least 10 feet long. As the jellyfish moved, or drifted, in the artificial current, its tentacles writhed against the glass so it looked almost as if it were trying to break out. It was the single most awesome and repulsive thing Alex had ever seen. "Salia, Salia." The voice came from behind Alex, and he twisted around to see a man coming down the stairs. Herod's Sale was short. He was so short that Alex's first impression was that he was looking at a reflection that had somehow been distorted. In his immaculate and expensive black suit with golden signet ring, polished brightly black shoes, he looked like a scaled-down model of a multi-millionaire businessman. His skin was dark, and his teeth flashed when he smiled. He had a round, bald head and very horrible eyes. The gray pupils were too small, surrounded on all sides by white. Alex was reminded of tadpoles before they hatch. When Sale stood next to him, his eyes were at the same level, and held much less warmth than the jellyfish. "A Portuguese man-of-war," Sale continued. He had a heavy accent brought with him from the Cairo marketplace. Okay, full disclosure, I don't know how to do an Egyptian accent, so I'm just making this guy sound slimy, 'cause he's slimy. So, I just thought I'd get that out there before we get too far into this dude. It's beautiful, don't you think?" "I wouldn't keep one as a pet," Alex said. "I came upon this one while I was diving in the South China Sea." Sale gestured at the glass display case, and Alex noticed 3 harpoon guns and a collection of knives resting on the velvet slots. "I love to kill fish," Sale went on, "but when I saw this specimen of Salia Salia, I knew I had to capture it and keep it. You see, it reminds me of myself. Exactly, Danny, slimy. It's 90% water. It has no brain, no guts, and no anus." Alex had dredged up the facts from somewhere and spoken them before he knew what he was doing. Sale glanced briefly at him and then turned back to the creature hovering over him in its tank. "It's an outsider," he said. "It drifts on its own, ignored by the other fish. It's silent, and yet it demands respect. You see those over there, Mr. Lester, the stinging cells? If you were to find yourself wrapped in there, it would be an unforgettable death." "Call me Alex," Alex said. He'd meant to say Felix, but somehow it had slipped out. It was the most stupid, the most amateurish mistake he could have made, but he'd been thrown by the way Sale had appeared and by the slow, hypnotic dance of the jellyfish. The gray eyes squirmed. "I thought your name was Felix." "My friends call me Alex." "Why?" "After Alex Ferguson. He's the manager of my father's favorite soccer team." It was the first thing Alex could think of, but he'd seen a soccer poster in Felix Lester's bedroom and knew that at least he'd chosen the right team. "Manchester United," he added. Sale smiled. "That's most amusing, Alex. Alex it shall be, and I hope we will become friends, Alex. You are a very lucky boy. You won the competition, and you are going to be the first teenager to try out my Stormbreaker. But this is also lucky, I think, for me. I want to know what you think of it, and I want you to tell me what you like and what you don't." The eyes dipped away, and suddenly he was businesslike. "We have only 3 days until the launch," he said. "We'd better get a blitty move on, as my father used to say. I'll have my man take you to your room, and tomorrow morning, first thing, you must get to work. There's a math program you should try, also languages. All the software was developed here at Sale Enterprises. Of course, we've talked to children, we've gone to teachers, to education experts, but you, my dear Alex, will be worth more to me than all of them put together." This dude is so fucking creepy. I can't. Oh my god. Okay. I'm gonna continue. As he talked, Sale had become more and more animated, carried away by his own enthusiasm. He'd become a completely different man. Alex had to admit that he'd taken an immediate dislike to Herod Sale. No wonder Blunt and the people at MI6 had mistrusted him. But now he was forced to think again. He was standing opposite of one of the richest men in England, a man who had decided out of the goodness of his heart to give a huge gift to English schools. Just because he was small and slimy didn't necessarily make him an enemy. Perhaps Blunt was wrong after all. "Ah, there's my man now," Sale said, "and about blitty time." The door had opened and a man had come in, dressed in a black suit and the tails of an old-fashioned butler. He was as tall and thin as his master was short and round, with a thatch of close-cropped ginger hair on top of a face that was so pale it almost looked paper white. From a distance it looked as if he was smiling, but as he drew closer, Alex gasped. The man had 2 horrendous scars, one on each side of his mouth, twisting all the way up to his ears. It was as if someone had, at some point, attempted to cut his face in half. Thank you for the follow, Oban. Appreciate you being here. The scars were a gruesome shade of mauve. There were similar, fainter scars, where at one time his cheeks had been stitched. "This is Mr. Grin," Sale said. "He changed his name after his accident." Accident? Alex found it hard not to stare at the terrible wound. "Mr. Grin used to work in a circus. It was a novelty knife-throwing act. For the climax, he used to catch a spinning knife between his teeth. But then, one night, his elderly mother came to the show. He waved to him from the front row, and he got the timing wrong. He's worked for me now, for a dozen years, and although his appearance may be displeasing, he is loyal and efficient. Don't try to talk to him. By the way, he has no tongue." "Yeah," Mr. Grin said. "Nice to meet you," Alex muttered. "Take him to the blue room," Sale commanded. He turned to Alex. "You're fortunate that one of our nicest rooms has come up free, here in the house. We had a security man staying here, but he left us quite suddenly. Oh? Why's that? Alex asked casually. I have no idea. One moment he was here, and the next he was gone. Sale smiled again. I hope you won't do the same, Alex. Mr. Grin gestured at the door, leaving Herod Sale standing in front of his huge... Wait, what? Oh, Herod Sale standing in front of his huge captive, the man of war. Got it. Alex left the room. Sorry, that tripped me up for a second. Standing in front of the aquarium. You should have just written that. Come on, Anthony. Come on, Horowitz. Get your shit together. Make a symbol to read out loud. He was led along a back passage, past more works of art, up a staircase, and then along a wide corridor with thick wood-paneled doors and chandeliers. Alex assumed that the main house was used for entertainment. Sale himself used to live here, but the computers would be constructed up in the modern buildings he'd seen opposite of the airstrip. Presumably, he would be taken there tomorrow. His room was at the far end. It was a large room with a 4-poster bed and a window looking into the fountain. Darkness had fallen, and the water, cascading 10 feet into the air over a semi-naked statue that looked remarkably like Herod Sale, was eerily illuminated by a dozen concealed lights. Next to the window was a table with an evening meal already laid out for him. Ham, cheese, salad. His luggage was laying on the bed. He went over to his case, a Nike sports bag, and examined it. When he'd closed it up, he'd inserted 3 hairs into the zip, trapping them in the metal teeth. They were no longer there. Alex opened the case and he went through it. Everything was exactly as it had been when he'd packed, but he was certain that the sports bag had been expertly and methodically searched. He took out the color Game Boy, inserted the Speed Wars cartridge, and pressed the start button. At once, the screen lit up with a green triangle. No, rectangle. The same shape as the room. He lifted the Game Boy up and swung it around him, following the line of the walls. A flashing red dot suddenly appeared on the screen. He walked forward, holding the Game Boy in front of him. The dot flashed faster, more intensely. He'd reached a picture hanging next to the bathroom, a squiggle of colors that looked suspiciously like a Picasso. He put the Game Boy down and being careful not to make a sound, lifted the canvas off the wall. The bug was taped behind it, a black disc about the size of a dime. Alex looked at it for a minute, wondering why it was there. Security? Or was Sale such a control freak that he had to know what his guests were doing every minute of the day and night? Alex looked at the picture and gently lowered it back into place. There was only one bug in the room, and the bathroom was clean. He ate his dinner, showered, and went to bed. As he passed the window, he noticed activity in the grounds near the fountains. There were lights coming out of the modern buildings. 3 men, all dressed in white overalls, were driving towards a house on top of a jeep. No, in an open-top jeep. 2 more men walked past. These were security guards, dressed in the same uniform as the men at the gate. They were both carrying semi-automatic machine guns. Not just a private army, but a well-armed one. He got into bed. The last person who had slept here had been his uncle, Ian Ryder. Had he seen something looking out of the window? Had he heard something? What could have happened that meant he had to die? Sleep took a long time coming. No, sorry, let me start that again. It's the last sentence of the chapter. I gotta get it right. Sleep took a long time coming to the dead man's bed. Oh my god, there we go. That was the end of chapter 7. Goldar, hello, welcome. Thank you for the raid. How was stream? What were you guys doing? Oh, look at that emote. Look at this. Oh my goodness. Hello, welcome. You came at the perfect time too. I just ended a chapter. which is the perfect time to stop and chat. What were y'all doing? Ooh, Fallout 4, nice. I keep meaning to play Fallout 4. It's on my list, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. Are you enjoying it? I hope you are. Let's see, what time is it? You are. That's for you. We're gonna have to. Thank you, Druid. Thank you for the hydrate. We're gonna have to actually call it here in terms of. I don't think I have enough battery left on my phone here to do another chapter, unfortunately. If I was sure that we were gonna make it, I would go ahead and read another one. But since we just got a raid in, I figured I'd stop and chat with y'all, see what's going on. And then we'll pick up chapter 8 on Monday next week. I'm thinking it's gonna be we'll start at noon Pacific time. I was trying to decide if I wanted to keep book club meetings to day or night streams. I'll have to think about it and figure it out to see which is going to be better for people coming through. The VODs are going to be up after the fact, so anyone who misses and is interested can stay caught up after the fact, I guess, but I haven't really worked out what the best time for this kind of thing is going to be. All I know is that with all this reading aloud, I need to make sure that I am taking hydration breaks. Druid has been extremely helpful tonight of making sure that I have enough water as I'm reading. I don't know if you can tell, but my voice is already starting to go, and we've only read like 3 chapters tonight. But I'm not going to push it anymore, and I'm going to run out of battery on my phone here too. I got to watch part. Ooh, I can't read anymore. My goodness, my eyes are starting to like glaze over. I got to watch part of your last reading stream while I was at work. So I was lurky. Oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, no, it's just like I'm not used to reading this much. Like, it's funny because I could stream for like 8 hours and not lose my voice, but an hour and a half of a reading stream like this while I'm doing different voices and stuff, it's just like, oh my god, my voice is tired. My voice is tired right now, which might be another good reason to have these reading streams during the day versus at night, because like I already streamed today. I streamed for like 4.5 hours this morning playing Red Dead Redemption 2 online with a friend, and then other stuff in the afternoon, and now the reading stream. So I'm like, I don't know if my voice is this tired because I've already been talking all day, or if it's just because these reading streams take a lot, like vocally. I don't know. Maybe it'll get better as I read out loud more. I don't know. But I'm thinking I'm gonna keep these book club meetings / reading streams to like once a week, because it does, like, it's last week after I finished reading, I was pooped. I didn't do anything the rest of the day. I just like sat on the couch scrolling on Twitter on my phone. Like I didn't do anything after that. I was done. I was tapped. And then like Tuesdays I play D&D, so it's a lot of talking again, but much more manageable. Anywho, as far as I am concerned, like my intention is to have our next reading stream Monday at noon Pacific Standard Time. I'm trying to keep it to that time slot. I had co-stream plans today, which is why I bumped book club down to the evening. But I think I'm gonna keep it during the day for the sake of my voice. You know what I mean? So, oh my god, I have like an eyelash in my eye. It's bothering me. And every time I have an eyelash in my eye, they're actually like still attached. They've just like, my eyelashes are so long that they like fold in on themselves sometimes. It's bizarre. And nobody gets to see how long and beautiful my eyelashes are because I wear glasses, and the glasses are the first thing that people see. Anywho. Let me see if... I'm so sorry that you just got here, Goldar, and I'm gonna send you on a raid. But I'm gonna run out of battery on my phone, and I'm gonna like lose my voice soon. So I'm gonna see who's live that we can send y'all over to raid. We do have a raid message if you would like to copy and paste that into the next stream that we go visit. That would be dope. Let me see if Dion is still live. It looks like they are. Okay. No. They are not live anymore. Okay. Let me figure out who we're gonna raid. Who's live right now? Oh! Statnex is live. Let's go their way. Let me grab this. Sorry chat, I'm just getting this all set up. Okay. So, we're gonna go raid Statnex. They are playing World of Warcraft tonight. Looks like they're having a good time. And, I will see y'all when I see you again. Thanks for being here. Don't forget, I know it's night for me, but don't forget to, can I turn that off? Don't forget to take your meds. Make sure you get hydrated. Do all the things that you need to do. Stay safe. I'm gonna go ahead and start this raid. Please, 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 please go show Statnex some big love. They're an amazing streamer. And super great community. So we're gonna go over there. Alright. We're gonna get this started in just a sec.
Just a second. How is everyone doing? Oh my goodness, welcome on in. Welcome to the sweater pile, where I'm bringing you silliness in a sweater, fresh every day. So grab a blanket, grab a sweater, and settle in for a fun time. I'm so happy to see you all. Oh my gosh, Haka, thank you so much for the follow. Let me give you a shout out, Nico. Y'all, if you're not already following Nico, fabulous human. Do it. Great vibes. Book club. Variety games.